All right, so today we're diving into one of the most debated paranormal investigations ever,
Okay.
the Enfield Poltergeist.
Right.
And we've got a pretty hefty stack of articles here that you've sent us all about it.
Yeah.
So we're gonna unpack it together.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's so fascinating about this case is just the sheer volume of evidence that was gathered.
Right.
It wasn't just, a couple of isolated incidents. This
Yeah.
was years of reported phenomena
Mm-hmm.
witnessed by, like you said, family members, but also neighbors,
Right.
and even some, very prominent and well-respected paranormal investigators like Maurice and Lyon Playfair.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, the number of people who claim to have witnessed strange events in that house is
Yeah.
crazy. But for those who might not be as familiar with the case, maybe we should rewind a bit.
Okay.
So we're 1970s England.
All right.
And we've got the Hodgson family. They seem like a pretty ordinary family,
Hmm.
but they're about to have a very extraordinary few years.
Right, this wasn't a team of ghost hunters or anything. This
Yeah.
was just a regular family
Yeah.
that kind of got thrust into the spotlight
Yeah.
when all this crazy stuff started happening.
Yeah, and these weren't subtle occurrences.
No.
Like, we're talking objects moving on their own,
Hmm.
disembodied voices,
Right.
even furniture being hurled across the room.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like something ripped straight from a horror movie.
Yeah, and what makes it stand out, I think, even more than like your typical haunted house story is the evidence that was collected.
Right.
I mean, you've got your eyewitness accounts, which there are tons of.
Mountains.
Mountains, yeah. But
Yeah.
then you've also got photographs and recordings from that time.
Yeah, and it wasn't just word of mouth.
Right.
I mean, the technology obviously wasn't as good back then.
Right.
But those photos and recordings, they exist.
Yeah.
And they're still debated today.
Yeah.
And it's also worth mentioning that even the Society for Psychical Research got involved.
Oh, yeah.
The expert on the SPR.
They were known for being pretty skeptical.
Yeah.
So that just adds another layer to it, and
Yeah,
they didn't come out and say like, oh, yeah, it's definitely ghosts.
Right.
But they didn't dismiss the case entirely either.
Right.
They found some aspects of it intriguing enough to keep studying.
That's what's so fascinating to me about this whole thing.
Yeah.
You've got all these witnesses. You've got the photos, the recordings.
Yeah.
Even the SPR's involvement.
Mm-hmm.
And there's still this huge question mark
Right.
hanging over it all.
Exactly. And that's why we're still talking about it all these years later.
Crazy.
It's a real head scratcher.
It is.
Yeah.
It really is amazing. I mean, you go down this rabbit hole with this case.
Yeah.
You've got the family. You've got all these eyewitness accounts.
Right.
You've got the photographs and recordings.
Yeah.
And yet here we are still debating it.
Still debating it. Yeah. And I think it's that tension that makes it so interesting. Like, you've got all this compelling evidence, but then you've got this like lingering skepticism.
Right.
And it's important to remember that skepticism is totally natural.
Yeah.
Especially when you're talking about something like this,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's put on our skeptic hats for a minute.
Okay.
What are some of the arguments against this being a genuine haunting?
Well, I think the biggest one really boils down to a lack of physical proof.
Right.
We've got a lot to work with here.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. But that one smoking gun,
Right.
that would just silence everybody.
Yeah.
It's just not there.
Like having all the clues but not knowing the answer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that opens the door for these other explanations,
Oh, yeah.
Some people have pointed to like the environment in the Hodgson household at the time.
That's true. I mean, living through that,
Yeah.
dealing with the media, I mean, it must have been incredibly stressful.
Oh, absolutely. And look, I don't want to like delve into speculation about their family dynamics or anything.
Right.
But some people have questioned whether that stress, played a role
Yeah.
in what was happening.
It's like your senses get heightened
Right.
when you're stressed out.
Exactly. Like a creaky floorboard suddenly becomes a ghost.
Exactly.
And then you throw in the media frenzy,
Oh, yeah.
which definitely didn't help.
Wow.
Reporters camped out in front of their house.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. And I think we have to remember that, media attention can sometimes, it can skew our perception of things, even if it doesn't mean to.
It's like looking at a drop of water with a magnifying glass.
Right.
Suddenly,
Yeah.
every little ripper seems huge.
Exactly. And that's what happened here. It just blew everything up.
So you've got the evidence.
Yeah.
You've got the skepticism.
Mm-hmm.
You've got this media frenzy.
Right.
But I think there's another layer to all of this.
Okay.
Something that goes even deeper.
I'm listening.
And I think it speaks to something that's fundamentally human.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So We've talked about what happened, or at least what people say happened to the Enfield house. We've looked at the evidence and the arguments and the skepticism, but at the end of the day, what really gets me is how this one case, this one house in North London, has just captured people's imaginations for decades.
Yeah, it's wild, isn't it?
It is. So what is it about these stories that just grab us and don't let go?
Well, I think the Enfield case, it's like this giant Rorschach test,
Oh, okay.
We all look at the same stuff, the same evidence, the same stories, but what we see, it kind of reflects our own, beliefs about the world.
It's like we're all holding a piece of the puzzle, but we don't know if it actually fits.
Exactly. And that's what keeps us coming back for more. Like our brains crave order. They crave these explanations. So when we're faced with something we can't explain, it's like we got to try and fill in the blanks ourselves.
So it's not really about finding out what actually happened at Enfield.
Right.
It's about what we believe is possible.
Yeah, and I think the Enfield case reminds us that reality is kind of blurry,
Okay.
It's not always so clear-cut. Like, it challenges what we think we know about the world, and it makes us at least consider the possibility that maybe there's more out there than we realize.
It's like when you stare up at the stars.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
feel small, and you realize just how much is out there that we don't understand.
Totally. And I think it's in those moments, when we're faced with the unknown, that we become open to those bigger possibilities.
So where does that leave us then? What should we take away from all of this?
Honestly, I think the best part about cases like this is that there are no easy answers.
Yeah.
It's the journey, right? It's about looking at everything and coming to your own conclusions.
And maybe it's those unanswered questions that keep things interesting.
Maybe so.
Well, that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and a huge thank you to you for sharing your insights on this case.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
And to all of you listening out there, keep asking those questions and keep exploring those mysteries. We'll see you next time.